You have to compensate for all of these inadequacies that you perceive about yourself. Now, some of these inadequacies could be legitimate, like maybe you are very short. Maybe you were born very short, and that's just the hand you were dealt, the cards you were dealt. And you might, and that's just that. But also some of these inadequacies, and you might say that that's an inadequacy. But also notice that just because you are physically short does not automatically equal inadequacy. Because there are very short people in the world who don't perceive their shortness as an inadequacy, but you might. So what is it about you that gets you to think that it is an inadequacy? You see, you might say, well, Leo, I don't think it's an inadequacy. I know it's an inadequacy because I'm just shorter. No, it's more complicated than that, because it's not really an inadequacy until you start to believe it is. There are, believe it or not, short people who don't believe that it's an inadequacy. You might say, well, they're just fooling themselves. Well, that's part of your worldview, which is part of how you survived. Because you really believe it's an inadequacy. But a lot of your inadequacies are not even as physical as just being short. A lot of your inadequacies could be misperceptions. You might think you're inadequate in some area, and that might be a complete illusion. That is sourced from something that happened in your life when you were young, and you misinterpreted it, or you didn't think about it very deeply, and then you just took it on as that inadequacy. And then that became a self-fulfilling prophecy over time, and it snowballed, and it fed it into itself, and then it manifested. I'm not saying that all of your inadequacies and problems are just manifested in that manner, but many of them are. Many of them are. So look into that. And then the problem is that when you develop these sort of perceived inadequacies and various biases in your mind and compensation mechanisms for how you're surviving, see, when you're surviving in life, most of the time when we're surviving, we're just barely scraping by. We're just pulling together whatever we can, whatever is at our hand that we can grasp on. Like, we'll grasp this thing there and that thing here, and we'll pull these two things together and combine them and combine a third thing. And if it just helps me to survive, that's just it. That's who I'm going to become and how I'm going to live for the rest of my life. We don't consciously sit there and choose like, well, I could survive in this way or that way. That's a healthy way. That's an unhealthy way. I'll choose that one. Or, oh, no, that's even better. I'll choose that one. And then I'll swap these around later. Like, most of us don't do this. And we don't think about the long-term consequences of the things that we're using to do our survival. Because most of us are so desperate, like we're going to take the first thing that will help us to survive. Like if smoking weed helps me to survive the sort of drudgery of school, I'm just going to start smoking weed chronically and hanging out with my weed buddies, and we're going to be doing that chronically, and then that's just going to be my way of surviving. And I'm not even going to think about other ways, other alternatives, or what the consequences are going to be, or how it's going to affect anything, or, how that's going to shape me 20 years down the road. And how that will distort your perception of reality. You see, that's the real kicker here, is that not only are you using all these ways to survive, some of them can be very dysfunctional, but since survival is such a serious thing, it starts to then distort your perception of reality, and then it becomes very difficult for you to perceive reality clearly, because your life becomes so hinged on surviving using these various biases and compensation mechanisms that you've adopted. You don't even know how you would live without them. And usually you can't adopt one of these compensation mechanisms or defense mechanisms without fooling yourself or deceiving yourself in some way. That's a lot of what our compensation mechanisms are. They're ways that we hide aspects of reality or truth which is painful or uncomfortable to us. Things we want to avoid or not look at because they're too ugly or too painful or too stressful or too uncomfortable or too embarrassing or too shocking, too scary. Like if you were born in a religious community and your whole sense of family and pride and joy in your life is that sort of community that's built around that religion, for you then to actually start to investigate the epistemic and metaphysical truth of that religion, to seriously investigate that, and then to start to discover that maybe it's not true. Do you see how threatening that is? And do you see why you would never do it? Most people would never do it. Everything in your psyche would scream and revolt and try to avoid that, try to deny it. So your mind would invent all sorts of defense mechanisms to avoid and deny really looking deeply into the sort of epistemics of your religious faith. Because if that were to crumble, then the thing that it's supporting, the community, the family, all that love you get and that sense of camaraderie and friendship and all the meaning in your life, all of that would crumble. And it's too much for you to even want to think about. So you just click the video off. You don't even want to hear this possibility. This is what I mean by biases and compensation mechanisms and distorting your perception of reality. And now, can you see how that distorts your entire perception of reality? Because these sorts of defense mechanisms you create to maintain your religious worldview, these defense mechanisms now you have to play this sort of game of avoiding certain things within science. You have to deny certain things within science. You have to deny with certain things within spiritual teachings. You have to not read certain books. You have to not watch certain videos, and you have to kind of play this dance of hide and seek for the rest of your life in order to maintain that house of cards. And you better believe that's going to distort your perception of reality. And then your mind has to rationalize all this to itself. It has to, first of all, you have to deny that you're doing any of this. Then you have to rationalize why actually that scientific book is actually bad or wrong, and this is wrong, and that person is wrong, and this video you shouldn't watch, and this channel is stupid, and then you start to judge, and you start to criticize, and boom, 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 boom. And then do you see how this multiplies and cascades? The distortions cascade, the lies and fantasies cascade. Don't think that this only applies to religious fanatics here. This example, I could have easily talked about science instead, or rationality, or business, or money, or sex, or relationships, or marriage, or children. It's not particular to religion here.